What's up, St. John? It's Father Jonathan, and last night I was scrolling through my Facebook feed and I read this really interesting post by the now retired, I suppose, professional wrestler Hulk Hogan. Now, Hogan may not mean much to you these days. He's not as famous as he once was, but when I was a kid, Hogan was one of the most famous professional athletes in the world. I mean, his face was everywhere. There were toys that looked like him. He was on kids' lunch boxes. He had his own cartoon, all that kind of stuff. His career took kind of a dark turn later on, you know, in the early 2000s. He had this reality show that was a little bit funky. And then he made some not so good choices with his life. So I wouldn't point to Hogan as a role model per se. But he is a Christian, or at least he became a Christian at some point. I'm not really sure when exactly that happened. And the point that he makes in this post is really interesting and worth noting. So I'm just going to read the post to you and then talk about it a little bit. So here's what Hogan says. He says, "In 3 short months, just like he did with the plagues of Egypt, God has taken away everything we worship. God said, you want to worship athletes? I will shut down the stadiums. You want to worship musicians? I will shut down civic centers. You want to worship actors? I will shut down theaters. You want to worship money? I will shut down the economy and collapse the stock market. You don't want to go to church and worship me? I will make it where you can't go to church." Then Hogan adds this quote. He doesn't identify it here, but it's 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14, where God says, "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land." And then Hogan adds at the end, "Maybe we don't need a vaccine. Maybe we need to take this time of isolation from the distractions of the world and have a personal revival where we focus on the only thing in the world that really matters, Jesus." Well, I certainly think we can hope for and pray for a vaccine to this disease even as we focus on Jesus. I don't think those things have to be mutually exclusive. But the point that Hogan is making is a good one, and it is about idolatry, which is one of the great sins that the Bible identifies. We don't usually think of idolatry as being one of the big ones. We usually kind of focus on murder and, you know, theft and some of these other things, but idolatry is actually a really big deal. And when we think of idolatry at all, usually we think of like something out of the Old Testament, you know, the people making a golden calf and worshiping it, or running after false gods or something like that. And that certainly is a form of idolatry. But idolatry is really any time that we take anything that is less than God and we worship it as if it is God. Anytime we take anything and we put it in the place of God and make it the most important thing in our lives. And we may not do it with our brains, right? I mean, you know, if you ask somebody, hey, do you worship this thing, you worship that thing, you know, you might not say, oh yeah, I do. But it's clear from our actions that that's where our heart is, that that's the thing we love the most, that's the thing we order our lives around. Everything else comes second to that, and we place our trust in it. And so Hogan identifies in that post some of the things that we have done that with, right? Sports is one of those things. I mean, you know, I love sports. I miss sports right now, but it can be an idol for us. Celebrity is another thing that he identifies. Money and economic security is another one. And we could add to that list, right? I mean, I think most of us, when we start thinking about this, what are the idols of our age? We could come up with a lot of things, right? Sex, politics, power, right? All of these things can be idols that we worship and that we place our trust in. Again, we may not think it directly, we may not say it directly, but we make these things first in our lives because we believe they're the things that matter the most And they're the things that will protect us. They're the things that will help us. They're the things that will get us through and make our lives meaningful and get us to the other side. And what Hogan points out is that in this current moment, God has laid bare for us the powerlessness of our idols. God has shown us in this current moment that these things can't save us, that these things aren't ultimate. Now, I said in the videos last week, and I'll say again, God is not the one who causes evil things to happen, right? So God's not the one who's causing the evils that come from this coronavirus epidemic to occur. Nevertheless, God can use even evil things that happen in our world for good purposes. God can take what is not a good thing and bring something that is good or bring something positive out of it. And it's entirely possible that one of the ways he is doing that in our current crisis is by forcing us to face the truth of our idols, forcing us to realize the powerlessness of our idols, and in so doing, to hopefully give us the opportunity to turn away from those things as idols and to worship him instead, to realize that we're dependent on Jesus for everything that we need, for everything we are, for everything we hope for. So the question that I pose to you guys today to think about in your meditations and your prayers, especially this week during Holy Week as we're preparing for Easter, think about this and pray about this. What are the idols in your life? And could this be the moment during this crisis? Could this be the moment that you turn away from some of those idols? That you pray for and find the courage and the strength to turn away from some of those idols and turn back towards Christ. Hope you all are doing well. Tomorrow is Wednesday, so I will virtually see you guys for Mass and homily tomorrow. Until then, stay safe, stay home, wash your hands. Grace, peace, and love.